It is not possible. That which bears hundreds of years of oblivion has returned. It has returned.
I let this happen. I let this ardor grow inside me. And so, the long night is severed. Dawn cometh!
Deogracius tells us that the miracle is fickle and capricious, that the paths of the miracle are twisted, and as such its grand scheme is far beyond our ken. The miracle sets us against the last son of the miracle, Escribar, while it cruelly punishes the people of Custodia. Yet, as the dawn of sin stirs, the miracle unleashes one of its other agents, another test for the Penitent one, in the form of Laudes and the Amanecidas. These ancient sentinels have been buried and hidden by the miracle for hundreds of years, and now they will be unearthed as the saeta resounds around Custodia. These 5 precede an event, an apocalyptic event, much as certain analogous biblical characters, which we will refer to later in the video when drawing comparison. The coming of the Amanecidas is marked by meeting with their herald, Ibrail. This poor twisted being has been imprisoned for an eternity, as the lower portion of the Petrified Bell seems to suggest. That lower portion reads as follows. Why have you chosen me? Why do I feel you in my flesh, in my skin, in my blood? Punishment, say at least one word, so I can understand why you keep me prisoner between sleep and wakefulness. May my body break for you, my arms be bound for you, my eyes awaken when you call me by name. Confine me to the stone room, and let the stone itself be the key that sets me free. To me, this reads as Ibrail pleading to the miracle, especially given that he later says he has been kept captive by the miracle's plans. He has been chosen to remain in a state of wakefulness and asleep, in a purgatory, until he is called upon to fulfill his purpose. Ibrail's dialogue suggests that his grotesque appearance is also the work of the miracle, upon him undertaking these duties. As he says,
I am called Ibrail, held captive by the ancient miracle's plans since my arms grew, since the first creak of my crooked neck. The miracle named me the messenger of the saeta.
This dialogue couples up nicely with what we read in the Stone Bell lore. My body breaks for you, my arms are bound for you. This is how we see him now. Ibrail goes on to describe the fact that he was named by the miracle as the messenger of the saeta, a melody that will allow the miracle to unearth that which has been long forgotten. When we speak to Ibrail later, he claims that the bugle that weighs down his arm and twists his spine is why he is the way he is. As we have come to expect from the miracle, it not only shapes people as it sees fit, but often this is cruel and a punishment in itself. Ibrail is then spirited away to 4 new locations across Custodia by the miracle after our meeting. These locations are chosen for their ability to let the saeta resonate around the region, and thereby unearthing the Amanecidas. Yet let us pause now and consider, what are the Amanecidas and what is the saeta? Well, as many of you are probably aware, Amanecidas translated from Spanish means dawns. In fact, Ibrail even indirectly refers to them as this when he mentions the Hall of the 5 Dawns, i.e. the Hall of the 5 Amanecidas, where Laudes is imprisoned behind a mirror, and where the weapons of the other 4 will eventually be displayed. Laudes' name is also relevant to the dawn imagery, as Laudes is a morning prayer chanted in the morning at dawn. So what I get from these naming conventions is that the Amanecidas are the harbingers of a new dawn, which matches with the title of the DLC, The Stir of Dawn, as well as the opening dialogue that we get now in the opening cinematic. But what does this all mean? What is this about a new dawn? Well, when thinking about this, I'd like to start with the opening quote from the cinematic. It states, "It is not the sun rising, but our sins." Now, to rise can mean a number of things, but in this context, I believe it means an increase or a growth. So as the age of corruption goes on, the sin of the world increases or grows, rather than it being like the sun rising. It means that the dawn of sin is growing. I see the new dawn as the end of everything, the apocalypse for which we are to answer for our sins. Our sins are rising, and now comes a judgment day marked by Laudes and her 4 Amanecidas, much like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Yes, there are 5 Amanecidas, but technically Laudes is all of them together, so I see the 4 Amanecidas being akin to the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. In the book of Revelations of the Bible, the 4 horsemen are characters which precede the final judgment, or the apocalypse as it's commonly known as. There is the first horseman which rides the white horse, and the rider is crowned and armed with a bow. The second horseman rides a red horse, whose rider wields a great sword. The third is on a black horse and wields scales, and the final horseman, who is death, rides a pale horse. To me, this is the clear inspiration behind the 5 dawns, that this is the analogy we are supposed to understand, especially since the 4 have different colours and weaponry. Each Amanecida also wields a different element, making them stand out. For example, the Amanecida of the Golden Blades wields fire, while the Amanecida of the Molten Thorn wields magic, much like the 4 horsemen and their different coloured horses, and different items that they hold. And not to labour this, but both groups herald an apocalyptic upcoming event. They precede the event. The Amanecidas precede this dawn, and the horsemen precede the apocalypse. Another interesting analogy between the Bible and this new lore is that the 7th seal that precedes the apocalypse in the Bible, is 7 trumpets being sounded. Again, this is another connection, given that the saeta is essentially a trumpet being played by Ibrail. We are meant to see the saeta and the coming of the Amanecidas as the end of the world, with the coming of this new dawn. In conjunction with this, there is also some interesting dialogue with a body on the holy wall of prohibitions which we can interact with. It states, "There is the metal tree, erected as guardian of the bridge. That tree, with its eroded bark, is the symbol of His Holiness's final communion with the miracle. Facing this eternal dusk, I will wait until I depart towards the other side of the dream." So this dialogue mentions an eternal dusk. So what follows is my interpretation, but I believe that this age of corruption, is essentially like an endless purgatory of punishment unleashed by the grievous miracle, with the creation of the ash pile, and an endless dusk, an end which we are perpetually on the brink of dusk, trapped before the dawn. Yet now our sin has grown, risen to a point that stone is now stirring, the price needs to be paid, and the 5 rise again to mark this occasion. Yet the dawn and the dusk should not be taken as a literal thing, but as a metaphorical representation of a transition between different epochs or different stages in a world. The sin of the world has now grown to a stage where this age will end one way or another. In fact, you could argue that the Amanecidas' first lives were also during a new dawn, as they were active during the time of the first miracle and the Father. As I have discussed in prior videos, notably my Penitent 1 video, at the end of ending A, Dio Gratius states that when the Penitent One becomes the new Father, it was a last sacrifice to finish penance and break off with the ungodly will of the grievous miracle. This to me is the only way to avert the dawn that the 5 heralds, by performing the sacrifice necessary to break off the miracle's punishment and answer for the guilt of the world. The Penitent One does this by taking on the guilt and weight of others as he goes on through the world, by increasing his burden in the mea culpa and taking a series of tests before he sacrifices himself for the guilt bill that is due at the end of this age. And so, as a final barrier to overcome, the miracle has summoned the 5 dawns, sentinels of the grievous miracle's works, to challenge the Penitent One. If he fails, our sins will rise as a new dawn, and knowing the miracle, this would not be a good thing. Let us turn to the sentinels themselves before returning to these ideas at the end of the video. Fortunately for us, Ibrail is quite forthcoming with information about Laudes and the Amanecidas. They were once the loyal guards of the Twisted One, before he passed on, at the time when he was paraded around as a holy object of worship. This also simultaneously explains the saeta. It's the processional song that was used to announce the coming of the Father as he was paraded around settlements. Translated from Spanish, it means sacred song in flamenco style. This should be no surprise, as we see other items that contain prayers or songs in the game, such as the saeta dolorosa. In the game, Ibrail, the eternal messenger of the Amanecidas, plays the saeta in the 4 chosen positions so that the miracle will awaken the Amanecidas, who are called into action by the processional song that they once marched to long ago. Later on again, Ibrail elaborates further on the origins, revealing the fact the 4 Amanecidas are essentially extensions of Laudes herself.
The passion of Laudes, the first Amanecida, was immense. Such was her devotion to the Twisted One that her body was unable to bear it. One night, she felt the pores of her skin open, and her very passion began to exit through them, taking the form of liquid gold. In that long night, that fine thread was woven by the High Will, creating the bodies of the other 4 women. They are nothing but the very passion of Laudes incarnate.
So the Amanecidas are the devotion of Laudes made manifest, in the bodies of 4 other women, spun from gold. It looks like there was someone who witnessed this event, for the item bead of gold thread describes the following. A miracle occurred in front of me. I found her lying on the floor. Her face was pale as if dead, yet relaxed and at peace. Next to her lay the bodies of 4 women covered in gold that shone and illuminated the room as if lit by an internal fire. From where I stood I could hear the beating of those 5 hearts. They echoed in the room, slowly sounding in unison. Their 5 hearts beating in unison again reiterates the fact that these 4 women are part of Laudes. They are all part of the same being. They are reflections of her, part of her, and each was as devoted to the Twisted One as she was. This lore also mentions the fact that the 5 illuminate the room. This idea is also reflected in a dialogue that we get from a corpse at the bottom of the fairest tree, which reads, "A sacred light stains the highest branches of the iron tree. Its brilliance penetrates its walls into the hall where she rests. This internal light is reflective of their own affiliation with the dawn, and no doubt is also meant to symbolise Laudes' burning passion for the Father. Jealous of the fervour these Amanecidas showed the Father or the Twisted One, the miracle buried them underground, as a punishment, as a penance, for an eternity until it would reclaim them and use them. That time is now, as we are on the cusp of a new dawn, much as the world was at the time of the first miracle. According to Ibrail, the sarcophagi are designed to contain the excess fervour of Laudes and her Amanecidas. Much like Ibrail, the Amanecidas have been imprisoned in a purgatory-like state for a long, long time, a millennia in fact. And with that, let us listen to Laudes' speech in full, as it gives us a lot of lore for us to dissect.
Oh, saeta! Well, once its piercing song shattered the mirrors and trinkets in my tomb, let its wail now grant light. Saeta, awakener of the desolate, ignite these 5 lightless eyes. These millennia of torment, my punishment, thread through my bones like poison. My forbidden passion is my penance. My golden virtuous strength armors me. I let this happen. I let this ardor grow inside me. But only the miracle giveth. Only the miracle taketh away. The fickle bargain that governs my awakening has been struck. I must end thy irreverent intention, penitent one. And so, the long night is severed. Dawn cometh!
So again, we get confirmation that the saeta summoned her forth, by shattering her tomb and then giving light to her 5 eyes, i.e. waking her up from her slumber and calling her to action. She also tells us why she was punished, for loving the Father too much, and for this she has suffered a great deal, a millennium of torment in fact. In part, she also reveals the reason for her appearance. The gold of her passion and ardour that was once used to craft the other 4 has armoured her body. It seems she can also wield her golden passion at will, even spinning platforms out of gold as we battle her atop the tree. After we defeat her, we receive the new sword heart, Brilliant Heart of Dawn. The lore portion of this item reads as a dedication of love and passion that we can clearly interpret as Laudes speaking to the Father. As we can see from the language used, she was really, truly devoted to the Father, even in love with him, for the holiness that he presented. And she felt the passion growing inside of her, and it was this passion that would one day flood from her pores as gold. When it comes to her 4 faces, I think we can assume these are representative of her other 4 aspects. Ultimately, Laudes is a singular being that has been split 4 ways. Finally, she reveals why she acts against us.
The fickle bargain that governs irreverent intention, Penitent One.
A bargain has clearly been struck between her and the Miracle. Her release comes at the price of ending the Penitent One. Ultimately she will fail in this, and the Penitent One strikes her down with a sword full of guilt. The apocalypse and the dawn that was to be brought with her is halted. When we return to the Hall of the Five Dawns, we find Ibrail on his knees in prayer. It seems he has been dedicated to her for a long time, and he speculates that she will now return to the other side of the dream, now that she has served out her penance and eternal sentence set by the Miracle. He then passes over as well, having also served his sentence and a well-deserved rest deserves them both. A seemingly uplifting note for this world, under the rule of the Miracle. But what was the point of the Miracle summoning these five and challenging us? It is clear the Penitent One is Miracle touched as well, given Chrysanthus' line in the Kneeling comic, which explains why we all rise again, as well as the fact the golden visages suggest we are chosen by the Miracle, never mind the fact we wield a Miracle-forged sword. So why does it appear as if the Miracle is playing both sides, and why does it set new obstacles against us? Well, the Miracle, first of all, is beyond our comprehension. As Deogratius says, it is fickle and capricious. Perhaps it was merely a test for the Penitent One, and if he failed then the world would be damned by their sins in the new dawn. Or perhaps it was simply to torture Laudes, part of her punishment to undertake a battle that she could not win. Her punishment for loving someone more than the Miracle. The Miracle just wants payment for sins, punishment for the weight of guilt that has accumulated. The path of the Penitent One needs to be arduous, or else it is not sufficient. Both Laudes and the Penitent One owe a penance to the Miracle, and by both of them serving it, they come into conflict with each other. Perhaps ending A is the outcome the Miracle always intended, because either way, it gets a price paid for the sin that is accumulated. It just wanted more blood and pain before the final sacrifice. As Deogratius says, penance never ends, it just changes form. And so while a new age of sorts dawns, with the sacrifice of the Penitent One, we can presume that the Miracle's plan extend far beyond our tiny minds, and beyond that of Laudes and the Amanecidas.
But only the Miracle giveth. Only the Miracle taketh away.
So thanks there guys, that is my take on the Amanecidas and Laudes, as well as their herald Ibrail. So if you like this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing, since I do mainly cover Blasphemous on this channel and I love the lore of the game. Let me know what you think of the lore, obviously open to interpretation, so I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys think about it. But for now, I will see you in the next lore video that we do. Take care.